The sun was sinking behind the jagged mesas, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The town of Red Willow was quiet, except for the soft creak of the swinging saloon doors and the distant clang of a blacksmith hammering metal. Dust swirled around the wooden sidewalks as a lone figure appeared on the horizon. Moving with a silent, predatory grace. Taye Swiftwind, an Apache warrior known across the territories for his unmatched skill with a bow and uncanny ability to vanish without a trace, stopped at the edge of town. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, the wind teasing the strands as he surveyed the place. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, caught every detail: the shuttered windows, the wary townsfolk peeking from behind curtains, and the flickering lanterns beginning to light up the streets. Taye's reputation had preceded him. Stories of his raids, his escapes from lawmen, and his confrontations with outlaws had grown taller with each retelling. Yet tonight, he was here for a reason unknown to the townspeople. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of whiskey. The piano player had stopped mid-tune as the crowd murmured about the newcomer. And then she entered. Lila Hartman, a striking woman of 30, strode through the doorway as though the floorboards belonged to her. She was dressed in a dark green dress that clung to her figure but allowed movement practical for a woman who had lived through more danger than most men in Red Willow. Her chestnut hair was tied back in a loose braid, and her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the saloon. When Taye walked in, the air seemed to change. A hush fell over the room. Patrons instinctively retreated to their tables, and even the bartender froze behind the counter. Taye stopped near the center of the room, his presence magnetic and unnerving. Lila's eyes met his. For a heartbeat, nothing moved then. Without a flicker of fear, she said, "I'm not afraid of you." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Taye's laugh came first a low, rumbling sound that seemed to echo off the walls and settle into the hearts of everyone present. It wasn't mocking. It was amused, intrigued, almost approving. "Not afraid, huh?" he said, his voice smooth, dangerous, and almost playful. "That's rare. Very rare." Lila squared her shoulders. "You don't scare me. Not with your stories, not with your reputation. Not even with that bow on your back." The saloon fell completely silent, as if holding its breath for what would come next. Taye stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. Most would have run or knelt. Most would have begged for mercy, he murmured, tilting his head. "But you stand. Why?" "Because I've seen fear," Lila said, her tone quiet but steady. "And I've survived it. You're not the first danger I've faced." The air between them crackled with tension. Taye's laugh faded into a smirk, and he studied her with the curiosity of a predator examining something wild yet untamed. "I like that," he said. "I like that very much." Before anyone could react, a commotion erupted near the back of the saloon. A group of rough-looking men barged in, weapons drawn, demanding the bartender hand over money and whiskey. Chaos erupted, chairs overturned, glasses shattered, and screams filled the air. Without hesitation, Lila drew a small pistol from her belt and fired. The first outlaw froze, shocked that anyone, especially a woman, would dare challenge him. Taye moved like liquid shadow, intercepting another man before he could reach the bar, his movements precise and deadly. For a moment, they fought side by side, a strange electric partnership. The townspeople watched, stunned, as an Apache warrior and a fearless woman held the saloon together. When the last outlaw hit the floor, Taye turned to Lila, a faint grin on his face. "You don't play it safe," he said. "Tell me, do you always walk into danger like it's a dance?" "I walk into life the same way," she replied, lowering her gun, her gaze unwavering. Taye's eyes gleamed with a dangerous curiosity, a promise of storms yet to come. "Then perhaps you're the only one I've met who can keep up with me." The saloon settled into uneasy silence again, but now it was different. The air was charged, a mixture of fear, awe, and something more, a connection forged in fire and bullets, and in the shadowed corner of the room, Taye knew this encounter would change everything. Red Willow had no idea that the night had just begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the saloon fight left Red Willow in stunned silence. Broken chairs and shattered glass littered the floor, and the outlaws had been unceremoniously tossed into the dirt outside, nursing bruises and egos. Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman stood near the bar, their chests heaving, eyes locked in a silent acknowledgement of the chaos they had just survived. But peace was short-lived. A sheriff's posse, alerted by the gunfire, rode into town with grim faces and guns drawn. The townsfolk stepped back, fear written on their faces. The sheriff, a tall man with a sunburned nose and iron jaw, dismounted and approached them. "You two," he barked, pointing a finger, "you're coming with us. There's been enough trouble in Red Willow tonight." Lila's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "We defended the town," she said evenly. "Those men were going to rob everyone. We stopped them." The sheriff sneered. "Doesn't matter. Trouble follows whoever crosses my town. Both of you, come quietly or things get ugly." Taye's dark eyes glimmered with a dangerous calm. "And if we don't?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost teasing. "You'll find out," the sheriff muttered, waving his men to advance. There was no time to debate. With a swift glance at Lila, Taye moved like shadow. In a blur of motion, he disarmed one deputy, tossing the gun toward the dusty floor, and stepped protectively in front of Lila. She drew her pistol with the practiced ease of someone who had faced worse than armed men in uniforms. Shots rang out, echoing off the wooden buildings and surrounding hills. Sparks flew from the sheriff's belt buckle as Taye deflected a gun with the flat of his hand. Lila's aim was true, disabling another deputy without endangering anyone else. It was precision, chaos, and a strange sort of dance, the Apache warrior and the fearless woman moving as one against the law that threatened to capture them unjustly. But even the best plans have limits. When the smoke cleared, Taye and Lila found themselves surrounded, guns leveled, hearts pounding. They had fought bravely, but sheer numbers won the moment. Reluctantly, they were bound and led to the Red Willow jailhouse, a small stone structure with iron bars, the smell of dust and sweat thick inside. The jail was dimly lit, a single lantern swinging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the walls. Lila sat on a rough wooden bench, hands tied with coarse rope, while Taye leaned against the cold stone, unshackled but watched closely by the sheriff and two deputies. "You're making a mistake," Lila said, her voice calm but sharp. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Taye chuckled softly, the sound low and amused. "I think you've misunderstood." "I understand perfectly," he said, his gaze sweeping the room before resting on her. "And I like you even more for it." The sheriff barked at Taye. "Keep talking, and I'll throw you in the cell with her." "Then perhaps we should be in the same cell," Taye said, his grin infuriatingly calm. "It seems we understand each other best when we're together in tight spots." Lila's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of amusement. "You're impossible," she muttered. Impossible. That was a word that would follow Taye like a shadow. And yet, there was something magnetic about him that even Lila couldn't deny. As the night stretched on, a strange alliance formed in silence. The jailhouse walls, cold and unyielding, became a confessional of sorts. Lila leaned against the stone, her hands itching to free herself, while Taye, sitting nearby, plotted their next move. Outside, The wind whispered across Red Willow, carrying with it secrets, rumors, and the ever-present threat of danger. Taye knew the sheriff wouldn't give up. Not for a woman like Lila, not for a man like him. Escape would be necessary, and it wouldn't be easy. But as he glanced at Lila, her determined expression lit by the swinging lantern, he realized something else. This was more than survival. There was a spark here, something dangerous, thrilling, and utterly irresistible. Together, they could face anything, the law, outlaws, even the desert itself. And Taye Swiftwind, for the first time in years, felt the pull of something other than freedom and vengeance. He felt the pull of a kindred spirit. The night deepened, the shadows grew, and somewhere outside, the distant howl of coyotes reminded them that the West was unforgiving. But in that small, grimy jail, two unlikely allies had found the first thread of trust and a hint of destiny woven between them. Tomorrow, they would either escape or the town would break them both. The jailhouse was silent, but silence was deceptive in Red Willow. Outside, the wind carried whispers of trouble boots on wooden sidewalks, distant wagon wheels, the faint chatter of deputies discussing the mysterious Apache warrior and the fearless woman who had defied them. Inside, shadows danced across the walls, thrown by the swinging lantern. As Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman planned their next move, Taye leaned close to Lila, his voice a low murmur. "We won't last long in here if we do nothing. The sheriff has already decided we're his prisoners of the week. Maybe longer." Lila's dark eyes flashed with determination. "I'm not waiting. I've spent too long letting men decide my fate." A faint grin touched Taye's lips. "Good. I like a woman who doesn't wait for fate." Minutes passed in careful observation. The sheriff had stationed 2 deputies outside the cell, and the third was doing rounds inside. Timing would be everything. Taye studied the ropes binding Lila's wrists, his fingers nimble and precise. With a flick, he loosened the not silent, invisible work. When her hands were free, he whispered, "We leave now." The moment was almost perfect. They slipped from the bench into the shadows, moving like phantoms. Every creak of the wooden floor sounded like a cannon shot in the tense silence. They reached the back window of the cell, a small barred opening. Taye examined the lock, his fingers brushing the cold iron. "I can open it, but the bars will slow us," he said. "Can you climb?" Lila's grin was wicked. "I can climb faster than any man here thinks I can." With that, she vaulted upward, landing nimbly on the roof of the jailhouse. Taye followed, his muscular frame flexible and precise. Together they crouched atop the shingles, listening. Below, the deputies were distracted, arguing over some minor detail. Perfect. "Red Willow isn't as friendly as it looks," Taye murmured. "We'll have to move carefully. Streets, alleys, back doors, anything to stay unseen." They slipped from rooftop to rooftop, shadows among shadows. Lila's heart pounded in sync with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. For a moment, fear flirted with her, but it was quickly drowned by exhilaration. There was something intoxicating about running with Taye Swiftwind danger, thrill, and an unspoken trust growing with every careful step. The town's outskirts were in sight. Beyond them, the desert awaited wide, open, unforgiving, yet full of opportunity. Freedom was close, but so was danger. A sheriff's posse was sure to pursue once their absence was noticed. Taye stopped abruptly in an alley, pulling Lila behind a stack of crates. "We need a diversion. The sheriff's men will be on us soon." Lila's eyes sparkled. "I have an idea." Moments later, a small fire ignited near the main street, a lantern tipped over intentionally. Smoke curled into the night, and shouts rang out. Deputies scrambled, leaving the streets momentarily empty. Taye and Lila moved quickly, slipping past the chaos toward the open plains. The desert stretched before them, moonlight silvering the sand and cacti. Taye adjusted the strap of his bow across his chest, his muscles taut, his mind alert. Lila fell into step beside him, pistol at the ready, heart racing but steady. "This isn't just about escape, is it?" Lila asked, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind. Taye's gaze met hers. "No, it's about survival. Yes, but it's also about understanding the world we live in. The freedom we take isn't given. It's earned." They ran, shadows among shadows, leaving Red Willow behind. Somewhere in the distance, the coyote's howl echoed, a reminder that the West was alive, watching, judging. But Taye and Lila moved as one, a force of skill and courage. Bound by necessity and growing respect. Hours passed, and dawn threatened the horizon with pale pink light. Taye and Lila paused atop a ridge, looking back at the town, distant and small. "We've made it this far," Lila said, brushing sand from her dress. Taye's dark eyes glimmered with an unreadable emotion. "And now the real journey begins. The West doesn't forgive easily, and we'll face more than just the sheriff and his men." Lila's lips curved into a determined smile. "Then we'll face it together." For the first time, Taye felt something more than survival coursing through him, a strange, unshakable bond with this woman who feared nothing. In the old, untamed West, trust was rare and partnership rarer still. Yet here it was, forged in danger, in fire, and in the shadows of a jailhouse escape. The wind carried them forward into the desert, toward unknown trials, but also toward an unspoken promise. Whatever lay ahead, Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman would face it together. The desert stretched endlessly before them, an unforgiving expanse of sand, rock, and sparse cacti. Dawn's pale light bathed the landscape in shades of gold and pink, yet the beauty was deceptive. The West had a way of hiding danger in plain sight. Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman moved cautiously, every step measured. Aware that pursuers could appear at any moment, Taye's eyes scanned the horizon. "Sharp as a hawk's. We can't stop," he said. Voice low, almost reverent to the vastness around them. "The sheriff will send men. Red Willow doesn't forgive defiance." Lila adjusted the strap of her pistol, dust clinging to her dress. "I can handle a few deputies," she said, but her tone carried a hint of tension. "I'm more worried about what lies ahead." Taye glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "The desert is honest. It doesn't lie, but it doesn't forgive weakness either." For hours they moved silently, shadows among shadows. The wind carried a dry whisper through the canyons, and the occasional screech of a hawk reminded them that nature was a constant observer. Lila noticed the scars along Taye's arms, faint but telling stories of past battles, a history written in flesh. She wanted to ask, but somehow knew this wasn't the time. Words were unnecessary. Survival was their only language. By midday, the sun hung high and merciless. They found temporary refuge in a narrow canyon, its walls casting long shadows that offered some relief from the heat. Taye knelt beside a small hidden spring, testing the water. It was clean, though shallow. He motioned for Lila to drink first. "You're cautious," she said, kneeling beside him. Her voice held a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Taye's dark eyes met hers. "Caution keeps people alive. And you? You've earned my caution." They drank quietly, the only sounds the trickle of water and the occasional gust of wind. For a fleeting moment, the desert seemed calm, almost forgiving. But Taye knew better. Danger in the West was never far, and secrets had a way of surfacing when least expected. "Why do you run, Taye?" Lila asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her eyes were searching, unafraid of the man who had already saved and perhaps captivated her. Taye's jaw tightened, and he stared at the water, lost in thought. I don't run from people, he finally said, voice low, almost a whisper. I run from injustice. And from my past. Lila studied him, sensing the weight behind his words. The desert carries stories, she murmured. It reveals truths, whether we're ready for them or not. A tense silence followed, filled with unspoken understanding. The bond between them, forged in the fire of the saloon and the jailhouse, deepened here in the heart of the desert. They were no longer just allies. They were kindred spirits, bound by danger and an unyielding will to survive. As afternoon waned, movement caught Taye's eye. Shadows shifting unnaturally among the rocks. He crouched low, signaling Lila to stay behind him. From the jagged rocks, a figure emerged, another rider, silhouetted against the sun, moving with deliberate speed. Not a deputy, but someone else entirely, a stranger with a black hat and a long coat that fluttered like a dark banner in the wind. The stranger halted, and Taye's hand moved instinctively toward his bow. Lila's pistol was already in position, steady and ready. The newcomer raised a hand in a gesture of truce. I'm not here to fight, the rider said, voice gravelly yet calm. I'm here to warn you. Warn us about what? Taye demanded, his gaze narrowing. The man dismounted, dust falling from his boots, revealing an intricately carved medallion around his neck, something Taye recognized from tales whispered among the tribes. The West is changing, the rider said, and Red Willow isn't the only danger. There are men who hunt those like you, and they won't stop until they've erased every trace. Lila's eyes narrowed. Men like him? She gestured toward Taye. The rider shook his head. Not just him, you, both of you. The desert can hide you, but the world beyond is ruthless. If you want to survive, you need allies. And secrets. Taye's hand relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left the stranger. We've managed so far, he said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. But we'll listen. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the canyon floor. The desert seemed alive, holding its breath, as if waiting for the next choice, the next step. Taye and Lila exchanged a glance, silent, loaded with understanding. Whatever lay ahead, the desert had only just begun to reveal its trials, and in the fading light, two fugitives, one Apache warrior, one fearless woman, stood poised on the edge of destiny, their hearts tethered together by courage, survival, and secrets yet untold. The desert night was deceptively quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind across jagged rocks. Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman pressed forward, their bodies tense, senses heightened. The rider's warning echoed in their minds. The West was changing. And the danger wasn't just the sheriff, it was something far more relentless. Taye paused atop a ridge, dark eyes scanning the terrain below. The moon cast long shadows over the rocky canyon, creating shapes that seemed almost alive. We're not alone, he murmured, voice low but firm. There's movement. Men waiting for us. Lila crouched beside him, pistol ready, eyes sharp as ever. How many? She whispered. Too many to run without a plan, Taye replied, his fingers brushing the beads of his tribal necklace absent-mindedly. We'll have to make them come to us, and we'll control the fight. The ridge overlooked a narrow pass known as Black Rock Ridge, notorious for ambushes and hidden pitfalls. Taye's mind raced through the possibilities, calculating angles, escape routes, and tactics. Lila, noticing his focus, allowed herself a brief smile. You always think 3 steps ahead, don't you? He glanced at her, his dark eyes glinting. It keeps us alive. And you? You keep me from losing track of why I fight. Their moment of quiet resolve shattered when shadows detached themselves from the rocks below. Figures emerged, rough men with guns, faces masked by scarves and hats, advancing in deliberate formation. The ambush had begun. Taye moved first, leaping down the slope with feline precision. Lila followed, pistol blazing, bullets striking the rocks near their attackers. The men fired back, the sound of gunfire echoing through the canyon like rolling thunder. Dust and sand kicked up around them as they dodged, rolled, and fought. Despite the chaos, Taye and Lila moved with a strange, intuitive synchronicity. He was lethal with his bow, arrows flying with pinpoint accuracy, while she provided cover and tactical support, every shot deliberate and controlled. Together, they were more than just a pair. They were a force of nature, unyielding and unstoppable. A sudden whistle drew their attention to a higher ledge. Reinforcements. Taye grabbed Lila's arm, pulling her toward a narrow crevice. "We can't fight them all here," he said. "Follow me this way." They ducked into the shadowy crack, pressing themselves against the cold stone. From their hidden vantage, they watched as the attackers scoured the ridge, frustration evident in their movements. The ambushers hadn't accounted for one thing. Taye and Lila weren't predictable. Minutes passed. Taye whispered instructions to Lila, outlining a counterattack that relied on speed, precision, and the terrain itself. Using loose rocks, arrows, and well-aimed shots, they created confusion among the men, causing some to stumble into the canyon below. Lila's quick thinking and sharpshooting were as crucial as Taye's mastery of stealth and strategy. By dawn, the ridge was quiet again, the attackers either wounded or retreating, their plans foiled. Taye and Lila stood at the edge of the canyon, breathing heavily, their clothes torn and dust-covered. The first rays of sunlight painted the desert in soft gold and crimson, revealing a stark beauty in the devastation of the night's battle. Lila lowered her pistol, her eyes meeting Taye's. "We survived," she said, voice steady despite the exhaustion. Taye allowed himself a rare, small smile. "For now," he replied, though his eyes carried the weight of the coming trials. "But the West isn't done with us yet." As they prepared to continue their journey, Taye noticed something unusual among the rocks, a small leather pouch, untouched by the fight. He picked it up, examining its contents, a map, a cryptic note, and a silver token etched with symbols of the Apache. Lila leaned over, intrigued. "Looks like someone wants us to follow it." Taye nodded, a flicker of curiosity in his dark eyes. "Or someone wants us to walk right into another trap. Either way, we're moving forward." The desert behind them glowed with the rising sun, but ahead, shadows hinted at secrets, danger, and revelations yet to come. Taye and Lila had survived the ambush, but the path ahead was no less treacherous, and every step would test their courage, skill, and the unspoken bond growing between them. As they descended Black Rock Ridge, their figures became silhouettes against the dawn, warriors and fugitives bound together, racing toward destiny in the unforgiving wilderness of the Old West. The desert was quieter now, the battle at Black Rock Ridge behind them, yet an uneasy tension clung to the air. Taye Swiftwind carried the small leather pouch with care, fingers brushing the edges of the silver token etched with Apache symbols. Its weight was heavier than expected, not in pounds, but in the promise of secrets and danger. Lila Hartman walked beside him, scanning the horizon with eyes trained to spot both beauty and threat. "This token? It isn't just a trinket," Taye murmured, turning it over in his hand. "It belonged to my father's people? Something tells me whoever left this wants me to follow, but I can't tell if it's a trap or a test." Lila's gaze softened, though her tone remained sharp. "Then we follow cautiously. We've survived worse, haven't we?" Taye's lips curved into a faint grin. "Survived, yes. But thriving? That's something else." Their journey took them through winding canyons and narrow gullies, the silver token guiding them like a talisman. Hours passed under the sun's relentless glare, and night fell with a canopy of stars stretching endlessly overhead. Taye and Lila made camp beside a natural rock formation, its shadowed interior providing shelter. The fire between them cast flickering light on their dust-streaked faces. Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if you weren't always on the run? Lila asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet but edged with curiosity. Taye's gaze was distant. I think about it. Sometimes I imagine a life with no battles, no blood on my hands. But then I remember that the world I live in doesn't allow for such peace. And yet here you are, she said, meeting his eyes. You still protect, still fight. And you saved me. Twice now. Taye's grin was faint but genuine. Maybe you're worth fighting for. His words hung in the firelight, unspoken emotions lingering in the space between them. Lila looked away briefly, a blush touching her cheeks before she composed herself. The night deepened. Taye studied the map from the leather pouch. It showed a route leading through a canyon known as Widow's Pass, ending at an abandoned settlement marked with a small symbol matching the silver token. This is where we're headed, he said. It's dangerous, but it may hold answers about my family, about why this token was left for us. Layla nodded. Then we take it one step at a time. They moved at first light, navigating the canyon with careful precision. Widow's Pass was narrow, with steep cliffs and hidden ledges. Every step was a test, but Taye's knowledge of terrain and Lila's keen instincts kept them safe. As the sun climbed, shadows revealed strange carvings on the canyon walls, Apache symbols matching those on the token. Taye's heart quickened. The signs confirmed they were on the right path. Suddenly, a low whistle echoed through the canyon. Taye motioned for Lila to freeze. From the shadows, figures emerged, men clothed in rough leather, eyes hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. They were armed and moved like predators, clearly waiting for them. Taye whispered, "Looks like we're not alone, again." Layla's hands gripped her pistol, but her eyes sparkled with defiance. "Then we make sure they regret following us." The ambush that followed was unlike any they had faced before. The canyon's twists and shadows became weapons themselves. Taye's arrows flew silently, striking with precision, while Lila's shots kept their enemies at bay. Rocks tumbled, creating barriers and diversions, forcing the attackers into vulnerable positions. Hours passed in a blur of strategy, agility, and unspoken trust. By dusk, Taye and Lila stood at the entrance of the abandoned settlement, the attackers defeated or scattered. The settlement was eerily silent, buildings half collapsed, dust settling over years of neglect. Taye held up the silver token, letting it catch the last rays of sunlight. "This is it," he whispered. "The answers. Or more questions." Lila stepped beside him, pistol lowered but ready. "Then we find out," she said. Her tone carried the same fearless resolve that had first drawn Taye's attention months ago in that Red Willow saloon as they entered the ruins. Shadows of the past seemed to stir. Every corner, every doorway hinted at secrets long buried. And Taye knew, deep in his heart, that whatever awaited them inside would change everything about the West, about survival, and about the bond he shared with Lila Hartman. The abandoned settlement loomed before them, a ghost of a town lost to time. The sun dipped low, casting long, jagged shadows across the crumbling wooden buildings. Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman moved cautiously, senses on high alert. The silver token glinted in Taye's hand, a key to secrets long buried. "This place feels alive," Lila whispered, scanning the ruins. Her pistol was ready, but her curiosity was stronger than her caution. "Like it's waiting for something." Taye nodded, dark eyes shadowed with a mixture of anticipation and unease. "It is. The token was left for me, yes, but it also leads to the truth of why my people fought, why my family hid it, and why some will kill to keep it buried. They stepped inside the largest building, its wooden floor creaking under their weight. Dust danced in the air, catching the fading light. The walls were lined with old crates and remnants of a long-forgotten store. But one detail drew Taye's attention, a carving on the wall, matching the symbols on the silver token. "This is it," Taye said, his voice low. "The message my ancestors wanted me to find." Lila studied the symbols, her brow furrowed. "What does it mean?" Taye ran a hand over the etchings. "It's a warning and a guide. It tells of a hidden cache, a place where my father's people stored their most precious items to protect them from those who sought to destroy them." As he spoke, a soft rumble echoed from beneath the floorboards. Taye and Lila froze. Dust shifted as a hidden trapdoor slowly opened, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. Without hesitation, Taye led the way, arrow notched, muscles coiled for action. Lila followed, pistol raised, her eyes never leaving his back. The stairs descended into a cavern, walls lined with ancient carvings and symbols. At the center of the room, a chest of carved wood and iron bands sat atop a stone pedestal. Taye approached it reverently, the weight of history pressing on him. "This," he breathed, lifting the lid. Inside were artifacts, gold, and manuscripts, treasures of his people and pieces of a forgotten past. Among them lay letters from his father, explaining the sacrifices made to protect their legacy. Lila stepped closer, awe replacing tension. "It's incredible and dangerous," she said softly. "No wonder people would kill for it." Before Taye could respond, a shadow moved at the cavern entrance. Men armed with rifles emerged from the darkness, the very same who had ambushed them at Widow's Pass. They had tracked Taye and Lila, intent on claiming the treasure for themselves. Taye's eyes darkened. "Stay behind me," he whispered. His muscles tensed as he stepped forward, bow drawn, every movement precise and lethal. Lila took a deep breath, her pistol steady, her fear replaced by resolve. The fight that followed was brutal and precise. Taye's arrow struck with deadly accuracy, felling attackers silently, while Lila moved with surprising agility, her bullets keeping others at bay. Dust and debris swirled as the attackers fell one by one, their attempts to seize the treasure thwarted at every turn. When the last man fell, silence returned. Taye and Lila stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily, eyes meeting in shared triumph and relief. "You never cease to amaze me," Lila said, lowering her pistol. Taye's grin was faint but genuine. "And you, Lila Hartman, never failed to surprise me either. Fearless, cunning, unrelenting." His eyes softened. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled, a rare warmth lighting her features. "We survived together. That's what matters." Taye carefully placed the silver token on the chest, letting the history of his people rest safely once more. The weight of the past was heavy, but they had proven themselves worthy guardians. As they stepped outside, the sun rose fully, bathing the desert in golden light. Freedom stretched before them, vast and untamed, as endless as the West itself. Taye and Lila walked side by side, silent in their understanding, their bond strengthened by danger, courage, and the secrets they had uncovered. "Where to now?" Lila asked, a hint of mischief in her voice. Taye glanced at her, muscles relaxed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "Anywhere we want. The West is ours to explore. Together." And as the wind carried the echoes of the past through the canyon, the Apache warrior and the fearless woman walked into the horizon, no longer hunted, no longer running, but bound by respect, trust, and the undeniable spark between them. The Old West remained dangerous, mysterious and unforgiving, but for Taye Swiftwind and Lila Hartman, It had finally become a place where they could define their own destiny.